everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and I'm joined by my friend, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends. How are you tonight, Dee?
I'm doing great, thank you. And how are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great too. Of course, I was doing really great until I discovered just a few minutes ago that the third of the topics I planned for tonight, the balance of payments war, is now kind of gone because the article we were basing it on by Michael Hudson has disappeared from the web literally overnight.
Crazy.
I don't think there was anything wrong with the article, but when I used the link I originally used to get the article, it says that domain has expired. That means Michael Hudson's personal website
Has expired.
has expired. But he wrote a great piece on the balance of payments war. It really was a great piece. It's what Trump is doing now, by laying tariffs on people. And Mike just destroyed the whole thing from the standpoint of the damage it's going to do to everybody, including the United States. But anyway, I had to do a last minute substitute of that. So here are topics for tonight. The first one is the smell of fear here in the United States in the face of Chinese technical advances in AI. Okay, the author says that one can smell the fear in the United States. I think that's going to be an interesting topic. Our second topic, the title of that is Underestimating BRICS Plus. And the basis for that is a lengthy dialogue, at least 40% of a lengthy dialogue from Dialogue Works between Pepe Escobar and Nima Al-Rashid. And that is an enormously interesting conversation that we will tap into and comment on. Hello, Steve. Steve Wolfbrand. Great to see you here.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then our third topic. What happened to our third topic? I think what happened to our first topic is I see what happened. Okay, I'll have to bring that in. Hang on just a second while I bring that in. I closed down the wrong thing, so I got to bring that in.
Okay. And I'm sharing everything out, and I hope you're sharing, and everybody's sharing here. It's important to share the show out. It's good to see L. Stephen Day here. Hello, Steve.
Yes, I'll be sharing in a minute. So anyway, the third topic is called the Chihuahua Energy Policy. It's a gas. So that's what we'll be getting into instead of the balance of the trade war. And Dee will be handling that one later on in the show. The first thing I'm going to do now is I will share. Okay, thank you. I'm going to share on Facebook.
Okay.
Now, by the way, if you're following the links to this, the link to theglobalsouth.co, which is the website of Michael Hudson, okay, is now broken. It's not going to come up with Trump's balance of payments stuff, so keep that in mind. I will be leaving in just a moment the link for our third topic, I'm going to put it in the chat. So
Okay.
see what it is at this point.
Okay. I just saw something. It has Mexico has announced that it will join Canada in imposing retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., specifically targeting red states.
Oh, that's such a great idea. That's whoever
Yes.
thought up that idea is a brilliant idea.
Yes,
Tariff
it is.
only the red state products. Oh God, Trump is going to hate that. Oh, so what he's going to do in response to that is uh, he's going to take the tariff charges off the red states, but keep them on the blue states.
Oh
I
God.
don't think he
It's
can do that. I don't think that would be legal
no,
for Trump to do.
right.
It might be legal for other nations to do that because of the structure of their laws, parliamentary systems and all, or the type of presidential system they have in Mexico.
Yes.
But I don't think that would be legal for the United States.
I don't think so either. Well, hello, Elvira is here.
Yes, and Friar Steve is here.
Friar Steve, yay, hello.
Hello, Friar Steve. How are you? Uh, okay, so anyway, we're ready to go with our first topic now, which is I'm going to bring up the piece. Title of it is great, absolutely great. From the Interview, and it's called "The U.S. is Reeking of the Smell of Fear." Okay, and it's by Wa Bin, January 31st, 2025. Okay, and we covered a previous article by him a few days ago. It was also on, DeepSeek and AI. It was a brilliant article, and this one's a brilliant article too. Anyway, DeepSeek, a Chinese AI startup, has sent a shockwave through the U.S. tech industry and Wall Street in the last week. Okay, it's LLM, that stands for Large Language Model. So LLM R1, trained for under $6 million and trained in 2 months, has outperformed the latest offerings from OpenAI, Meta, which is another word for Facebook, roughly speaking, Google, and Microsoft, who have spent tens of billions and years on their models. The DeepSeek AI app has topped download charts in the US and China, replacing Chat GPT as the number one AI productivity tool. Chat GPT, of course, is the product of OpenAI, uh, which is the U.S. corporation that has been leading in this country in the AI area and leading in the world until the release of the DeepSeek app. Due to its breakthrough technology that shows powerful AI can be developed with very limited investment in compute, DeepSeek's emergency has sent NVIDIA stock reeling, losing as much as 17% on Monday and wiping out $600 billion in market cap. Interestingly, as we speak, barely a few days after the shockwave on Wall Street, DeepSeek is experiencing a massive denial of service attacks from the US on its servers, affecting new registration. So is that a denial of service attack from the CIA? Or from the NSA? What the hell is going on? The US government Or maybe it's from OpenAI itself. The U.S. government, including the U.S. Navy, has banned the use of DeepSeek for its personnel. Wonderful. Stick your head in the sand, boys. And the Congress is already discussing ways to slow down and disrupt DeepSeek. This episode is eerily reminiscent of the Huawei ban. And by the way, Huawei just released an LLM application that it says is superior to DeepSeek. So just so you know, okay, as we go on. This episode is eerily reminiscent of the Huawei ban, the TikTok ban, the chip ban, and the EV tariffs. The U.S. regime has fully adopted the Tony Harding school of how to win by breaking the leg of her competitor. Ask but Nancy Kerrigan about it. Boy, that's an old example. Man, how many years ago did that happen to Nancy Kerrigan? As thoughtful people put all these panic-ridden actions in context, I think, by the way, Tony Harding was spelled wrong, wasn't it? Toni? Yes. As thoughtful people put all these panic-ridden actions in context, the most obvious conclusion emerges. The U.S. regime is not acting from any position of strength. It is behaving like a chicken little who cannot compete, win honestly, and is running scared. The list of anti-China activities out of successive U.S. regimes is long and varied. Trump started to impose a 60% tariff on Chinese imports since 2017, a policy the Biden regime continued. The Biden regime then imposed a 100% tax on Chinese electric vehicles, which have not yet even entered the U.S. market. But the competitiveness of Chinese EVs is enough to get Biden to enact preemptive tariffs. The Biden regime imposed dozens of export controls on China, often using coercion against its own allies, quote unquote, to follow suit, such as Holland's ASML and South Korea's Hynix and Samsung. The Biden regime put thousands of Chinese companies on the U.S. Entity List with all sorts of made-up justifications in hope of disrupting these companies' operations. Trump is again making noises to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese imports. He's going further to threaten Panama and Greenland in order to contain China. The FBI launched, the infamous China Initiative to prosecute Chinese scientists working in the United States, yielding 0 prosecutable cases after ruining the lives of numerous scholars and scientists. So I wonder whether Kash Patel is going to stop that if he gets confirmed. That's my comment on that one. Anyway, McCarthyism is alive and well in the, quote, land of the free, unquote. J. Edgar Hoover, the cross-dresser, would be proud of the viciousness of the criminal organization he founded. But of course, everybody's convinced that Kash Patel is going to ruin that organization. I guess it depends on your perspective. The U.S. regime has harassed the hundreds of thousands Chinese students, in the U.S. who are contributing $150 billion a year to the U.S. economy. It is attempting to prevent Chinese students from studying in advanced technical fields. Anyone studying the defunct neoliberal economics or neoconservative politics and faux democracy is welcome, of course. All I have to say about that is it may be a good thing for the Chinese students if they're prevented from studying in advanced technical fields, because then they can go back to China, where I suspect that by now the universities are better. Sorry, such a bitter comment. I don't really know that. But I suspect they've got some pretty mean universities in China right now when it comes to technical fields. I don't know if they have the equivalent of MIT or CIT yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do. The Congress passed a $1.6 billion smear fund in a so-called, quote, anti CCP propaganda, unquote, campaign. Of course, the CPP is the Chinese Communist Party. The best to counter other so-called propaganda, the best way to counter other so-called propaganda is, of course, to launch a bigger one of your own. Every political appointee, as well as elected official, must espouse a fervent anti-China rhetoric in confirmation hearings, TV interviews, and corporate media op-eds. If you are not a China hawk, you have no place in the U.S. power elite. Every Pentagon official and military-industrial complex-funded think tanker, quote-unquote, is expected to sound tough about the coming China-U.S. war. I guess that's why I'm not in any think tank, right? They come up with frightening concepts like, quote, unmanned hellscape, quote, strategy in the Taiwan Strait. Seemingly unaware that China is years ago in drone tech, okay, in production, or did he mean that it's years ahead in drone tech and production? I think he meant the latter. And the U.S. has tried to mobilize its vassals from Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and India into anti-China military alliances. It has formed fearsome sounding acronyms like AUKUS for AUKUS and QUAD for Quad, which are looked upon in awe only by itself. The, quote, most powerful country in the history of the world, unquote, as self-claimed by multiple U.S. regimes, seems unconfident to take on China on its own. On the other hand, China is playing its own game. There's no political figure or, quote, expert, unquote, jumping up and down on national or local TV to shout against the U.S. There is little attention paid to the theatrics in Washington and its client states, except, of course, for Xi Jinping now replying to U.S. Tariffs with tariffs of its own, of course. I add that to this article. China's focus on overcoming the difficulties posed by the aggressive U.S. actions, reducing dependencies, and developing its indigenous capabilities. China has diversified its trades. Trading with emerging markets now account for more than 50% of China's total trade. Trade with the United States is less than 3% of its GDP as of 2024. That's a chilling figure, isn't it? Huawei has revived its mobile business and dethroned Apple to return to market leadership in China. Its leadership is more entrenched in the core telecom technology area. It is more vertically integrated with its own chip design and manufacturing supply chain. Huawei has expanded its product offerings to include operating systems for mobile phones, the Harmony OS Next operating system, also electric vehicles, streaming services, and autonomous driving. In AI, Chinese companies are making rapid progress. In addition to DeepSeek, ByteDance, Baidu, Alibaba, O1.ai, have all developed sophisticated LLM models. Okay, by the way, I said before that it was Huawei uh, uh, who released uh, um, 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 who released a model that was beating DeepSeek and AI benchmarks. It actually, okay, was Alibaba, okay, that announced, okay, a new uh, application whose benchmarks they claim are beating the Alibaba benchmarks. China leads in industrial AI applications from robotics, drones to autonomous driving. Companies such as Unitree, DJI, BYD, Xiaomi are integrating. Xiaomi is spelled XIAOMI, by the way, are integrating AI technologies into multiple areas of practical applications beyond generative AI. That's not to say that they're not leading in generative AI. Evidently, they currently are leading in generative AI. It has recently launched the world's first sixth generation fighter prototypes, not one, but two at the same time. The world's first drone carrier. Oh, by the way, there's a YouTube ad on that, on what it looks like. And the first hypersonic stealth unmanned airplanes for strike and reconnaissance. The first stealth unmanned warship and the most powerful long range air defense systems. It is progressing rapidly in directed energy weapons, in military 5G, in atomic timing, and space warfare systems. All these military technological breakthroughs were unveiled in the last 3 months. While the U.S. politicians and military figures seem to conflate theatrics with reality, China is quietly amassing the capability to overwhelm its opponent in raw military might, industrial might, and economic might. As we watch with amusement the clownish performance of the U.S. elite, the stinking odor of fear reeks so much you can smell it from across the Pacific. This was republished from Wabin's Substack by permission of the author, okay, or the representative. I was going to say his representative, but I don't know whether Wan Bin is a male or a female, okay, or anywhere in between for that matter. So, folks, I thought that was a terribly informative article.
Yes, and I've read um, from others and heard, actually listened to others that have said the same, basically the same thing, as how behind the U.S. is, but also when you talk about tariffs, that China has alternates, um, I guess, avenues to trade, with the BRICS countries. So
Yes,
they're not dependent on the U.S. There's other places they could get goods from.
yes. If trade with the U.S. is less than 3% of its GDP, uh, that's easily replaced.
Right.
So if we stop trade with them, who are we hurting? Doesn't look like, we're hurting anybody but ourselves. Uh, okay, the Michael Hudson article, which I'm sure we'll be able to get back in a few days and treat it next week, but that goes into much greater detail about the effects of the balance of trade war that we seem to be having now with Canada, with Mexico, and with China.
We're hurting ourselves.
We are hurting ourselves.
Okay, there's some comments here, Joe, if you want to go over some comments.
I will go over some comments. Thank you. Steve Wolfbrand says hello again at about 9:27. Steve, you said hello before.
Yeah, he switched to Facebook. He was on
Oh,
YouTube,
I
I think,
see. I
before.
see. Yeah, he was on YouTube. That's right. Okay, so people say hi. Steve was on YouTube before. Friar Steve says, Doc, I sent you a letter on Patreon. It's about the third temple. Very troubling stuff. Okay, thank you, Friar Steve. I'll go look it up. Let's see what you said. If DeepSeek is a learning protocol, how can it be relied upon to be accurate in all things? If it's being told narratives that are false. Uh, okay, I don't think that any of the AIs can be relied upon to be accurate in all things. They're based on the data that's been fed into it. Okay. Now, it seems clear from what I've heard of DeepSeek that it hasn't been fed much information about, uh, the Tiananmen Square incident in China. So it doesn't know very much about that and can't really tell you very much about that. And maybe there are other blind spots it has too. But it's still been fed, an enormous amount of data on, various types of subjects, and it can be very, very good on those particular subjects. And in benchmark tests, of course, it's doing as well or better than the open AI, um, than chat GBT. Fry Steve says, AI is a new space race. It's true DeepSeek has just jumped ahead, but evidently Alibaba is now ahead of DeepSeek. And I think that Huawei has a model that's at least as good as DeepSeek also. Let's consider this the race between the tortoise and the hare. DeepSeek is the hare racing ahead. So let's see who crosses the finish line first, okay, in the end. Yeah, I understand, by the way. Speaking of the tortoise and the hare, okay, there's already news that DeepSeek has been running very fast ahead and will be shortly releasing some new language models that are better than the current version of DeepSeek. So they haven't stopped working. I mean, they're racing ahead. Okay, what this may really be about, instead of a race between the tortoise and the hare, it may be about the race between uh, small teams in constant communication with each other and with an ecological network supporting them. Okay, and a very large organization that has trouble communicating across its many parts, which I suspect is what's going on with the large corporations inside of the United States. Uh, our corporations are, are really very bureaucratic compared to DeepSeek. And so maybe they will be able to get across the finish line first. But we have the other Chinese corporations as well. The accomplishments of Huawei and Alibaba are evidently not to be sneezed at, Friar Steve said. And DeepSeek collects info. The U.S. government should ban it from government systems, no doubt. Uh, well, it can't ban it from government systems across the world, right? So if other government systems have access to US info, then it's going to pick up the US info from there. Evelina says, don't China's exports to US only account for less than but 10% of China's exports total? Okay, I'm ready to believe that. As I've said, I've cited the statistic that it accounts for 3% of China's GDP. So it may well account for 10% of China's total exports. Evelina says Mexico and Canada exports are more reliant, but dependent on, U.S. Yes, but the U.S. is also dependent on Mexico and Canada for various things. For I say yet, but pretty sure U.S. is their top importer to China. United States, South Korea, Japan, Australia are top importers for China. I think that's true. I think Australia is a very important import for China. But on the other hand, I don't think South Korea and Japan and Australia are going to have trouble continuing to import, okay, from those other nations, because I don't think they're ready to cut off their noses to spite their faces. I may be mistaken about that. I know the U.S. is going to pressure them. Trump is going to pressure them. But I think China is a very large trading partner for Japan, perhaps the biggest trading partner for Japan. I think South Korea, okay, is in a similar position. And I know that Australia is dependent on its sales to China. I mean, it's got to sell that stuff to China or its economy is really going to be hurt. Fry Steve says in 2023, China's exports to the U.S. accounted for 2.9% of China's GDP. It's a significant decrease from 2018, when exports to the U.S. made up 3.5% of China's GDP. Yes, it is significant. And Steve Wolfman says, hello. Hello. Fry Steve says, hello, fellow Steve. And Fry Steve says, yes, Doc, I agree. I think at the end it would do its own research and realize it can't trust humans no matter where they're from. It's only a few years old. It's still a toddler. I'll be concerned when it becomes a teenager. Steve Wolfman says only 3%. Wow. Yeah, it is kind of wow. Okay, so let's go to our second topic here, which is underestimating BRICS Plus. And that is based on a striking dialogue over at, Dialogue Works, between the host of Dialogue Works, who is Nima Al-Rashid, and the wonderful journalist Pepe Escobar. And we're going to cover about a half hour of their dialogue, which was about a 76-minute, dialogue. So we're going to cover the first 32 minutes or so of it, which was pretty interesting to say the least. So let me pull it up there. Okay, and Dee, please feel free to interrupt and comment, okay, at any point, and I will quickly stop the video so you can do that.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. Let me get all the way back to the beginning.
31st, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pepe.
My pleasure, Nima. Always to see your fabulous smile. And to all of you, our audience, greetings from Moscow. It's afternoon here. No winter. Everything is very, very calm, and everybody getting ready for the weekend.
Let's get started, Pepe, with what Donald Trump said on his social media. He is threatening BRICS countries with 100% tariffs on them, and he's talking about the new currency, a new currency for BRICS. And Peskov responded that we were never after a new currency for BRICS. We are inventing, or we are after a new system of trades. What's your take on what is happening in the mind of Donald Trump and the people who are giving him information? Is that right? Is BRICS looking for a new currency?
Okay, allow me to, burst out laughing because this proves that Mr. Disco Inferno himself, as I thought he might call him to Sputnik this week, and his coterie, people all around him, they don't have a bloody clue what BRICS is actually doing. Obviously, they don't know anything that was discussed at the summit in Kazan in October, 1 month before the American elections. Obviously,
So that point in itself is very, very important. I think Pepe is right. I think the Trump team has very superficial knowledge of BRICS. They haven't been paying attention to it. They were too busy with planning the administration and all the various things that they're doing right now that are creating such a big mess here in the United States. And the last thing they were probably concerned with was the activities, of the BRICS nations. We can't accept that people such as Hegseth and Sebastian Gorka and Secretary of State, specifically Rubio, have any time to spend on studying up on what BRICS has been doing. So let's continue.
they haven't tracked what BRICS did last year and what they plan to do ahead in terms of trying to fine-tune the international system, financial and geoeconomic, but not coming with a new BRICS currency. This is something that they have said repeatedly over and over again, especially during last year in all those meetings, the preparatory meetings for Kazan, the BRICS Business Council meetings, coming from Putin, from Lavrov, from Ryabkov, from everybody. So obviously these people don't do their homework, which is more than obvious when it comes to how the Beltway and Washington work. They have no clue about the rest of the world, period. And this is not stopping with this new administration. And obviously Peskov, with the patience of 10,000 Buddhist monks in a cave in Gansu province, he has to say, look, this is not what we're doing. We're trying to find alternative modes of payment, which is what they are actually doing, and this is what they are actually implementing. So BRICS currency, it's irrelevant at this point, because what we're already seeing, starting with bilateral Russia-China relations, where 95% or so is already in yuan and rubles, is trading in their own currencies, which is something more than obvious, bypassing the US dollar without saying that you're bypassing the US dollar. You're just ignoring the US dollar. It's a completely different story, which is what's going to happen from now on, even more forcefully, between Iran and Russia after they sign this strategic partnership. Everything will be in their local, all their trade is going to be in their local currency.
Okay, so there you have it. The dominant form of trading, like, among the BRICS nations is going to be in local currencies. For the foreseeable future, it's not going to be in any kind of international currency.
And this is going to spread out across the BRICS. Even so-called BRICS that are not exactly BRICS because they are on the fence, like Saudi Arabia, it's the rise of the petro yuan, which is already a reality. So obviously, this is too complicated for Trump to, he doesn't read, and he doesn't read the most important non-US think tank reports saying what's going on geoeconomically across the world.
So Trump evidently recently read a book on McKinley, President McKinley. And he was so impressed by the strategy of tariffs that was being used by McKinley that this time around he decided to go ape on tariffs, which is what, we are seeing right now. Someone should have slipped him a book on what caused the recession of 1929. He might have had an entirely different sort of reaction. Trump wants to turn back our foreign policy to 1899.
It's totally crazy. It's absurd.
It is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. It is totally crazy. I mean, how many times do we have to learn a lesson that when you get into a tariff war, the result of a tariff war is depression, severe depression.
And there's nobody around him to tell him that.
Well, Marco Rubio should be able to tell him that. He's not so stupid that he doesn't know that, I think.
So
Well,
he feels out something that.
Huh?
it could be their plan, how to, collapse the economy here.
They're interested in collapsing the economy for what reason?
That would be a good question, unless they really feel that the elite are going to be the ones that somehow.
Maybe
Yeah.
Trump thinks if he collapses the economy here, he can embark on a program of giving everybody stimulus checks. And they'll be so grateful to him for giving them the stimulus checks that he'll have clear sailing. I mean, the stimulus check strategy was successful for him for a while in the last go round. It was very successful, in getting us out of the dire straits of COVID. Okay, and it would have gotten him elected at the end of his first term, except that he wasn't able to get more than a $600 stimulus check out of Mitch McConnell. If he had gotten a $1,200 or $1,400 stimulus check out of Mitch McConnell, at the end of the year and in time for the election, he probably would have won that 2020 election. Anyway. Come on, Pepe.
Coming from a president of the US is frankly stupid, because he is condemning something that is not even happening.
This is what Ivy League universities you can get into with a 3.
Okay, I love the way he said stupid.
And here comes the question in the mind of the Trump administration. It seems that not only a BRICS currency, but they're trying to force these countries to trade in US dollar. That's
Exactly.
the main reason that they're talking this way. But how is that going to happen if they put tremendous sanctions on Russia, for example, on Iran, on other countries? At the same time, you want them to use US dollar. You sanction them, and you want on the two things that don't come together in any
Of
sort of
course not.
technology.
You're right, Dima. First of all, the absurdity of ignoring what the global, not the rest of the world, the global majority is trying to do. That's number one. Number two, the key point is what Michael Hudson has explained in his latest essay. And I included the link in this Disco Inferno column earlier this week. Everybody should read Michael's latest essay. You can read it in English at his website or at globalsouth.co. There are already translations in Portuguese and in Spanish. Very, very important. He's basically saying that Trump has declared war against the rest of the world. Absolutely correct, because what he's just reaffirmed with his 100% tariffs coming on BRICS. And the most important point is that this war is intrinsically related to what Michael says is the main problem, which is foreign debt in US dollars. Most of the global South, their foreign debt to IMF, World Bank, international financial system, loan sharks, the usual suspects, right, is in US dollars. It's essentially unpayable. Or if you pay what you owe to these loan sharks, you never develop as a sovereign nation. So Michael goes straight to the point. He says, if there is not a solution, or if the global South as a whole does not decide to, we're not going to pay this foreign debt anymore, because they're paying interest over interest over interest over interest. So in the end, they'll spend their several lifetimes paying the debt. If you don't solve this problem, you don't solve the problem of development of a great deal of the global South. Obviously, from an American point of view, this is what they want this to keep going, because this is how they exploit essentially the rest of the world.
Okay, so let us point out if countries of the global south decide they're not going to pay their debts, okay, to the World Bank or to the IMF, to the international financial institutions that were set up under Bretton Woods, then what's going to make them pay that debt? Well, okay, in the past, what was making them actually pay that debt was that in order to operate, many of the global south countries needed more loans. And the only place they could get the foreign exchange, the only way they could borrow, okay, the foreign exchange, was to go back to the same financial institutions. So they, had to, get themselves into debt on top of debt over a period of years. Now that situation has changed somewhat because there's a new game in town. That is it's the game called the New Development Bank, otherwise known as the BRICS Bank, which was capitalized with $100 billion. And there's more capital where that came from as well, because China is still holding huge amounts of dollar resources. Okay, so now the BRICS nations can go to the New Development Bank for financing. And so they're now in a greater position to say, we want you to write down our debt. We can't pay the debt, and we're not going to pay it. So you have to write it down for us. So what's going to happen then? Well, what's going to happen then is that's going to be a cause for the United States and other collective West countries to get into wars with global South countries to try to get them to pay their debt. So we're going to have to watch out for those kinds of wars as, time goes on. That could become a very dangerous trend, starting wars over the debt. Or alternatively, the countries of the West or their international institutions can write down the debts of the global South countries. And I think over a period of time, that is likely to happen. But not without a lot of squawking.
When they don't go straight for plunder and destroying nations or bombing nations into democracy, this is how they do it. It's a financial op. It's basically interest over interest on this eternal foreign debt. So that's why everyone should read that essay to look at the big picture. And obviously, Trump would never frame it this way, because only analysts who understand how the empire works, they frame it this way. The empire is a completely different operation, because it's an empire of plunder, and based on what Michael has described in detail as fire, financialization forever on everything, and inbuilt in that marketization of everything, including the way they want to marketize artificial intelligence. And then the Chinese with DeepSeek and with others that will be coming, they broke completely this business model in these past few days. The insurance industry all over the world also is basically controlled by Atlanticist interests, and real estate speculation. So this is the basis of the empire of plunder is fire, as defined by Michael. So if you don't try to dismantle fire and dismantle the foreign debt forever, it's impossible for the global south, BRICS or no BRICS, to keep developing. So this is the absolute key point. Absolute key point, you know. And now the stage is set because instinctively Trump has already launched a war against the BRICS. This is something that many of us had been saying even before the inauguration. There's going to be a war against BRICS in 2025. Yes, and that's it. Now it's on. So now it's up to BRICS and other multilateral organizations working closely with BRICS to devise their, I would say.
Okay, did you want to say something, D?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, by the way, I got another source for the Michael Hudson article. It's michaelhudson.com. Okay, so we can go back to the original plan of doing that article, next, rather than the Chihuahua energy thing, which we can do some other time. Okay, but the Michael Hudson article is really great. It's very important to do it. So we can proceed now, with that original plan. I left the link to the Michael Hudson article in the public chat, D, so you can pick it up there.
All righty, thank you.
A more streamlined game planning on parallel systems and alternative payment systems, and more getting totally into payment settlements in their own currencies, intra-BRICS and BRICS with the outsiders in the global majority. So this is the big geoeconomic game during the Trump presidency and beyond.
Have you ever wondered how buying Israeli goods
It seems that the first two countries that would be tariffed by Donald Trump and his administration going to be Canada and Mexico.
Mexico, yes, 25%.
Why is he starting this way, and what's the importance of that for Donald Trump?
Well, it's basically reintegrated the North American market and subordinating the North American market to the empire completely. You do the same our way or the highway. If you don't know what we want, we're going to slap sanctions on you ad infinitum. And the next in line is going to be the EU, probably in a matter of a few weeks after that, or maximum March, mid-March, etc. And then China, and then we're going to have the real deal, Nima. I'm sure our audience remembers the tsunami of Trump sanctions against China. The big ones, I think, starting 2018. He came to power early 2017, and the big tsunami came in 2018, especially on China's tech sector. Just look at the China tech sector now in 2025, where, according to latest reports in the tech industry everywhere, China is ahead of the US in virtually everything. It's like a matter of more than 80% of all vital industrial and tech sectors. So this is part of what the Chinese had planned way before Trump 1.0. Their program Made in China 2025, which even after Trump sanctions, they kept doing what they had planned without calling it Made in China 2025. Very Chinese. And that explains everything, including the DeepSeek breakthrough, which apparently, at least from the point of view of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, came out of nowhere. No, if you were following what the Chinese were doing, it came out of a very specific investment and technology center program, part of the Made in China 2025. If you see by item, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, solar panels, electric vehicles, etc., everything was detailed by the Chinese already in the past decade, in detail, everything. And the great thing about centralized socialist economy, but based on meritocracy, not based on Wall Street gains, is that the results are tangible. And when they happen, everybody, how did they do that? It's very simple. Planning, competence, meritocracy, high-level standards at the best Chinese universities. For instance, all those kids and all these guys who are working on DeepSeek, they graduated on the top Chinese universities. Not that they were important from Yale or Ivy or any Ivy League. No, indigenous, local. So this is how you do it. You know.
Okay, that's a little simplistic. The reason why I say this is, of course, we have the example of the Soviet Union, where there was also centralized forms of planning. For a while, the Soviet Union was tremendously successful in terms of economic growth. It had enormous rates of economic growth for some time, but then it got, so thoroughly bureaucratized, that it sort of strangled, the economy, and the growth of the Soviet Union over a period of time. It looked like in the 1950s, they were going to bury the West, because the economic growth was so great. But by the 70s, the economy of Russia was paralyzed. So what's different, in China? It's socialized economy. It's a planned economy, but also it has a huge sector involved in markets and the dynamics, of markets. It doesn't allow private sector activity and markets to overwhelm the public sector goals. That's what's different in China. But China does make use of the market and capitalist kinds of incentives and forces, but it's gotten where it's gotten because it hasn't followed the kind of strategy that was followed by the Soviet Union. It hasn't followed just a planning and socialist strategy. It's followed a mixed economy strategy. And that's what's been very successful for it. It built a different kind of mixed economy strategy. It called it, of course, socialism with Chinese characteristics, or communism, with Chinese characteristics. But the Chinese characteristics cultivated both small businesses and big businesses, and businesses, private businesses, regulated and conditioned by the government, are going gangbusters in China and have been rebuilding the whole country, but under central guidance, not tight central control, but central guidance. A key difference.
And obviously, in terms of the vision, the overall vision for Chinese tech, we can say it's people-centered, applying one of their metaphors. Very, Xi Jinping is very fond of these metaphors. It is people-centered. It's not stock exchange centered. And that's all the difference. That's all you need to know.
Attention retirees, if you're willing to be at your computer from 9 a.m.
Video in which the CEO of OpenAI, ChatGPT, was talking with Indians, and he said that you're not able to. They were asking him if they would be able to make a new AI for Indians. He said that that's not possible. Don't go that way. You're gonna waste your time doing this. And you see right now, China is able to put something substantial, something important, as you see, DeepSeek, and we've learned about Alibaba.
Alibaba, their model is exactly.
It's totally game changer, and it shows how China is changing the game in terms of technology, in terms of the way that you can fight and defeat your enemy or your rival. And at the same time, Donald Trump is talking about the Iron Dome for the United States. It's unbelievable. You look at the way that they see it. It's all about military in their mind. It's
Of
not
course.
going to change.
And based on paradigms that have proven themselves to be failing all across the spectrum. The Iron Dome in Israel is a joke. The Houthis prove that it's a joke. The Iranians prove that it's a joke. And he wants to do an Iron Dome in the US. It will be the equivalent of an F-35 program multiplied by 10. Look at the F-35. We don't need to say anything about it. Now they crash spontaneously. Probably there's a Zeus, a Thunderbolt. By the way, another sneak. Look what this was one of the. They gave me another sneak this week, and the great thing, Lima, is that inside you have actual sticks. They don't know. So this is what the Americans are doing. We have an orange snake, most powerful symbol, which they don't. And inside you have, okay, you can maybe eat this thing. The Russians know you can eat this thing, but you actually have the real orange snake, which was the product of what? Physics, mathematics, great universities, lots of research coming, out of decades of research. And then you have origine, which is the practical result. Same thing with the Chinese AI models. Everything was planned, and everything is the fruit of deep research. It's not blah 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 for Wall Street shareholders. It's the
So what he's saying is the adaptations of the Chinese and Russian, their game-changing things, are the result of hard work and research, producing real results. They're not producing just a bunch of marketing and propaganda and financial manipulation. They're producing results you can see and you can touch and you can feel.
absolute mega difference between casino capitalism, casino neoliberalism, and neoliberal exploitation and marketization of everything, including life itself, and meritocratic systems like the Chinese system, based on study, lots of study and application, and Soviet then Russian system, which in terms of high technology is in a class by itself as well.
There are 3 simple changes I tell all of my arthritis patients to make. Number 1, you have to start drinking.
Just another ad.
Really pissed the way they
I know.
interrupt
I know.
programs.
Yeah. It's the ad each time they put in an ad. Then when I have to go back to it, it buffers. So
What was the importance of these new 2 AI from China? And we know that the United States, the stock market in the United States was shocked and it went all down. Is that gonna change the policy? Because it was so important. At least when you see Donald Trump, mostly is concerned about the economy of the United States, the trades of the United States. What influence does would it have on the policy, on the strategy of the United States, in your opinion?
It's not a strategy of the United States. It's a strategy of a certain Silicon Valley players, very, very few ones. Wall Street is a reflection of what they are doing, and let's say the speculation megaphone of what Silicon Valley is doing. They're gonna put a lot of extra money in their own research. There's no question about that. I outlined some of it in my column, in the Disco Inferno column. In fact, this column, what we are discussing, I more or less using a disco metaphor from the 70s to make it more factual for a large audience. But what's inside is very serious, because these are the 3 challenges for Trump 2.0. The tech war against China, which now they are looking around and said, oh, we thought we had won that. No, there's a long way ahead. These are the first stages of the artificial intelligence war, for instance. We are in round 1. The second one is what Michael Hudson details, and Trump just confirmed the war against the BRICS, which is the war against the global majority. And the third point is using Ukraine. which we're going to be talking about, of course. How Trump is trying to position himself to bombastically announce something about Ukraine, which probably won't have anything to do with real life and what's actually happening live in the battlefields in Novorossiya. Not to mention what the Russians want out of the whole thing. So these are the three top themes, right? But in terms of the tech war against China, we are on round one of a total tech war, no questions. And the disparity of funds is gigantic. Silicon Valley and American investors on one side with hundreds of billions of dollars. The Chinese are doing this on the cheap, but with their intellectual firepower and a lot of planning ahead very well, like Huawei was always planning ahead. I visited the Huawei lab in Shenzhen nearly 10 years ago, Nima. I was there in 2016. It was almost 10 years ago. Lots of the stuff that you see around, they were already testing it in Shenzhen in 2016. You know, this is how you do it. You know, and the concentration, of intellectual firepower in that campus in Shenzhen was already extraordinary. Now they expanded the campuses. Even Huawei is like the center of an industrial tech matrix in China. There's a guy who published an outstanding map. You can try to find him. His name is Kyle Chen, and I think I put it on my Telegram channel, and the diagram is fascinating because everything is integrated: drones, autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, smartphones, humanoid robots, industrial robots, electric vehicles, batteries, etc. And you have all the companies that are doing this. So then you have interlinked everybody, and at the center, Huawei, of course. But you have DJI, the largest manufacturer of drones in the world, BYD, electric vehicles, SMIC, semiconductors, Oppo. They started with phones, and now they're going all over the place. Alibaba, ByteDance, Tencent, you know, Cherry cars. So
that's a list of the major Chinese companies, right there. It's good just to focus on that list. Remember those names and note what Pepe is telling us, that they're all together, okay, in an ecosystem. And they've set up also physically what's essentially, okay, a Silicon Valley for China in Shenzhen.
The Chinese, with a fraction of that tsunami of dollars that the Americans have, they created their own tech industrial ecosystem. It's like if it was a metaphor for the multinodal world, which is the best definition of what we're aiming at. Much better than multipolar. They created this multinodal ecosystem where all these industries are interlinked, talk to each other, and they're sharing their research progress. This is one of the reasons that explains what Huawei was doing and now and continues to do even under sanctions, and the DeepSeek phenomenon. It's not out of the blue. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of interlocked planning, and a central government that is more or less supervising all that.
So, okay, it's not out of nowhere. It's out of an ecosystem. It's out of a network. It's out of sharing. It's knowledge management on a grand scale. The government is loosely guiding the interchanges of knowledge, okay, and the growth of knowledge within the knowledge network that it created in China. You can understand what's happening very well if you look at it from a knowledge processing and knowledge management standpoint and a complex adaptive system standpoint, okay, as well.
And listening to these players, to their suggestions. If they need help, they'll get help. This is how it works.
You know, what's so fascinating about China is that everything they produce is high quality and low in terms of the price of the product. And we saw this in this DeepSeek and Alibaba AI. On the other hand, whatever the United States produces is so expensive. And this could be the main reason for the military industrial complex to be defeated in Ukraine, because they couldn't produce the way that Russia is producing. Russia is outproducing the whole West in Ukraine.
The whole West.
And here comes the question.
I think that point is a very, very important one. I've often thought about a similar point, actually, myself. How is it that with all the money we spend on a military industrial complex, that it was possible for the Russians to outproduce us in the context of the war, okay, in Ukraine? Why is it we're spending so much money and yet we've been running out of ammunition to give to the Ukrainians? Running out of instruments of war to give to the Ukrainians? And the answer is, we're giving them a lot of really expensive stuff. And we don't have the capacity, with all the money we're spending, to produce more and more and more and more of this really expensive stuff. The quality of stuff what the Russians are producing for the Ukraine war is apparently higher quality than we're producing, and far higher quantity. People have talked about quantity differences before, but how do those quantity differences come to exist when what Russia is spending is, I think they've been spending $65 billion a year on their military, even right now, maybe 65 billion a year equivalent, 70 billion a year equivalent. Our military establishment, as you know, is spending $1 trillion. And we're running out of stuff. And the Russians are out producing the collective West by, what is it, 8 to 1 or 10 to 1? And higher quality stuff, too. This has to be changed if we're going to compete with other nations.
Question: are they going to change their strategy? Are they going to change their manner? Because the way that it's almost impossible for many countries. They don't have that much of wealth to buy products. Let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
2 cars were tested. One of them by BYD. It was a electric car, BYD, and the other one a British car. One of the British car was it's about $1.5 million, and BYD say $200,000.
Mm.
And BYD defeated the British car.
Mm.
And this is the future. I can
Yep.
see it here in Brazil. They're changing everything. It's dominating the industry here in Brazil.
Mm.
And it has to be, it's a great, if I were American, that was a great importance for me to understand what China is doing, how they can achieve that, what's their strategy, what's their plan for the future. But when you see the United States still talking about the conflict in Ukraine, Middle East, you don't see that sort of vision. Even in the Trump administration, we were hoping that they're going to change the strategy on the part of the United States.
First of all, they don't have a strategy, Nima, so they cannot change something they don't have. They have quarterly earnings, and they have speculation on Wall Street. This is the definition of casino capitalism. That's it. Second, initial reactions to DeepSeek. We had 2 main reactions. American politicians, let's sanction the Chinese even more. Second reaction, coming from OpenAI, for instance. They copied our model, which is the equivalent of, who was the idiot who said that the Russians copied hypersonic? I'm sorry, the president of the United States himself. He said that the Americans copied the hypersonic designs from, the Russians copied the hypersonic designs from the US. Oops. So what does that tell you? First of all, that they're blind to what the rest of the world is doing, because it's a hubristic thing of all decaying empires. You consider the rest of the world inferior to what you're doing, to what you did, and how did you get to the top. And second, because the logic of financial capitalism and casino capitalism is more and more profits at the stock exchange over and over again. This is the only value. It's not providing a very good product to consumers. Long lasting and with enough service so you keep the consumer attached to your brand. I'll give an example. There is a revolt that I have noticed, which is now becoming global against Apple products. Well, I am part of this because I use Apple. I have what, 4 or 5 different Apple gadgets, and people are getting extremely pissed with the price they have to pay for all these gadgets. Um, the all these upgrades that don't satisfy what they really need in the end, and the fact that you are confined into the Apple ecosystem and you cannot interact with other tech systems. So all over, we hear this from Latin America, from Africa, from Europe as well. People, that's it. We want to get out of it. So there is a lot of people who are moving into Linux, for instance. They can't stand dealing with Apple anymore. That's just one example. Because Apple was hubris. They saw they had cornered the market. They sold themselves as the coolest tech thing in the universe, and there was no follow-up, essentially. You know, when they launched one iPhone after another with virtually no difference, with an absolute horrible markup, people around the world, they say, why do we need this when we can buy a fabulous Vivo or Oppo for 20% or 30% of the price? So once again, that's the inner logic, of the system, and not paying attention in the end, not paying attention to what customers really want or are able to pay, especially in times of a geoeconomic crisis.
One of the main issues right now in the mind of the people, decision makers in the United States is the issue of Taiwan. And they were talking about arming Taiwan, fighting for Taiwan, or they, even Republicans, were talking about bombing Taiwan in order to not let. If you remember, Vivek Ramaswamy was talking this way during the 2024 presidential election. And right now, Donald Trump is talking about putting tariffs on the productions and the semiconductor production in Taiwan in order to bring them back to the United States. How is that going to influence the United States position in Taiwan and the policies of Taiwanese government?
I'll answer to you when I go to China later. In fact, maybe in 2 months from now, I'll be going to China. I need to go back to China. I haven't been in China for a while to keep up with China. It's a daily endeavor, right? Taiwan is not an issue for China. Taiwan is an issue for the empire because they need to create an issue in the South China Sea. And this now, whatever happens you change an administration in Washington and the blah, 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 still the same. And now with the president who doesn't even know what ASEAN means. I prefer not even get into it because he will look even more embarrassing. So it's not an issue. And the Chinese are concentrated on their domestic economy, on the tech war, waiting for the sanctions, how they're going to react to the sanctions. And Taiwan now is in the back burner. So they will react when the time comes, and if this administration starts something, let's say, having weird ideas about Taiwan, which is something that might happen. But it's not, from the Chinese point of view, it's the matter is settled, and they're following what Deng Xiaoping said. Even before 1997, Taiwan will be back before 2049. That's it.
So, okay, I'm going to stop it there. That is the Chinese attitude if we don't attack them. From their point of view, but Taiwan is part of China and will be back under the rule of mainland China by 2049. And there's no rush about that. It's just going to naturally happen as the economy of China gets stronger and stronger and more powerful. The magnet of the mainland will pull Taiwan back. That's the way they're looking at it. That's what they, are counting on. And because that's their strategy, this is an issue for us. We are casting about rather wildly for things that we can do to see to it that Taiwan doesn't just get folded back to China. But as the Chinese military and Chinese technology gets stronger and stronger, we have no hope of succeeding with respect to Taiwan. This means that what we should be doing is reorienting our foreign policy. Now, there are indications, there are tendencies inside of the Trump administration to focus not so much on Europe and what goes on in Europe, and not even so much on Asia and what goes on in Asia, but basically to retreat to the Western Hemisphere. That's what this new emphasis on integrating Canada and Mexico more with the United States and the Panama Canal more with the United States is about. It's about trying to increase our control of what goes on in this hemisphere and focusing on this hemisphere. And I think that's going to be increasingly what's going to go on. At the present time, we're seeing a lot of moving around, going back and forth, having a foreign policy that is wavering. We haven't really decided yet whether we want to go entirely with a Colonel McGregor conception of centering our foreign policy in this hemisphere. But there is such a trend inside of the dynamics of the Trump administration. How long will it take to become, the dominant trend? I cannot say. But I do think that we won't have peace and we won't have security and we won't have the kind of growth in our society that we need to have until we do that, until we focus more on our domestic problems and the problems in our neighborhood of the world, we have to accept the multipolar world and our place inside of that particular world. I'm going to look at your comments now, and then we'll go on to the Michael Wilson article. Dee, were you going to say something?
Oh no, I just unmuted myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the
Okay.
dogs were here barking and stuff, so
Ah, yes, the dogs.
I know, so that's why I mute myself a lot.
Yes. Okay, Fry Steve says, I've already seen China try to use debt against nations in Africa. They send in their teams to take minerals, unsure of any place that America has ever done this. Can you name an example where the U.S. is doing this? Well, I think, okay, in the South Americans, we are taking minerals from various places, okay, in South America. And a lot of the nations of South America, okay, are indebted to financial institutions under our control, like the World Bank, the IMF, and the IADB, which is the Inter-American Development Bank. We use the loans from those banks to place the nations of South America, okay, in debt. And the banking institutions influence those nations in such a way that our corporations can take out the mineral wealth, okay, of those nations. Fristies, Evelina Pont, do you have any data to support this? Evelina asked, the West does that. Evelina Pont, where? Data, please. Evelina Pont, the West is very broad. Name names I can. China and France.
Well, France is where Africa is concerned. They've stolen a lot from Africa and caused a lot of hardship. Well, the U.S. is doing so. What was it, the cobalt? Well, it's U.S. corporations.
Yes, I know that's true. Okay, I think that's also true in relation to the diamond market. Okay, but I'm thinking in Latin America, particularly, okay, of lithium
Yes.
and of how active Elon Musk is being in trying to control the lithium supply chain from the nations of Latin America to here,
Yes.
especially those nations around the area of Lake Titicaca, where a lot of the lithium comes from, okay, in South America. Freisty says communism is not centralized democracy; it's communism. Okay, I didn't say it was, centralized democracy, but I don't think
They have their own type. When you look at, you have to really understand it and read up on it. Because I think, Friar Steve, you're taking this Western viewpoint of the anti-communist. You're not looking at it from a different perspective.
Okay, I studied carefully the communism of the Soviet Union and the initial communism of China, okay, as well. At one point in my life, I nearly specialized in those areas in my studies, okay, of politics. And I can tell you that communism in China, okay, of today, may have the same label on it, but it's nothing like the communism in Russia. It's nothing like the communism in China in the early days of Mao. It's nothing like the communism in China, okay, in the days of the revolution of Mao. It's not even like the communism in China in the days of Deng Xiaoping. I mean, it has such a dynamic um, uh, 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 private sector. I mean, it's a network system of some kind where the various forces are socially integrated and culturally integrated. And it's not entirely centralized. Yes, there's central planning and there's guidance from the center, but there's much communication and much decentralized forms of problem solving going on in that system.
And that's good. And that is good.
There's a lot of communication between the different levels of government in China, the central government, okay, and local governments, and the kind of interaction that goes down isn't top-down interaction. There's communication. There are mechanisms for development of consensus. There are efforts to accommodate the centralizing characteristics with the local governing characteristics. I mean, it's much different. In Russia, it's not at all like the communist system was. Okay, in Russia, it looks like an authoritarian system. I know from the outside because Putin, maintains political control. Okay, but again, there's a lot of localism in his particular system. Okay, at this point. Okay, and certainly it's a much more capitalistic system in Russia than it is a statist system.
Right. And they had to recover from the neoliberalism that the U.S. Brought over there.
All right, and that they accepted initially in the 1990s, which was a huge mistake for them. Okay, they accepted that, and it resulted in a disaster in Russia. I mean, 10 million people died from neoliberal shock. There's a book on this. It's called, as I recall, The Body Economic. Okay, I forget the name of the authors. It was written sometime in the 2000s. But if you read that book, it is absolutely shocking what happened to Russia, during the 1990s and how many people died because they were trying to apply, a neoliberal model brought over from the United States that we ourselves, thank God, weren't practicing during the 1990s. It was devastating for them. Putin pulled them out of that. That's why he's been so successful and so popular as a ruler of Russia.
And economic-wise, they've had different people with MMT over there as well.
But there were
now they do. I was going to say, in the past they didn't, but they do now.
Right, because in the 1990s, at least until the second half of the 1990s, there wasn't any MMT.
Right.
Not yet. So, Friar Steve says, USSR collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. Yes, that was a very big problem. Communism cannot work without a capitalist market partnership. Showing China friendly nations treaty status led to its success. Communism needs capitalism to make money, otherwise it will collapse. I don't know if I entirely agree with your categories there, Friar Steve. I would put the narrative, in a slightly different way. But I think we both believe in that it's not about a capitalist economic system or a communist economic system or a socialist economic system. Successful economic systems have various mixes of those principles. I think we have a mixed economy there. We have a mixed economy here. I think our economy here has gotten unbalanced too much towards the capitalist side. It was much healthier maybe 50 years ago than it is now. But certainly China has become successful because it has a strong market sector, a strong strain of market economy in it, and a strong strain of capitalism in it. And I wouldn't say the central part is actually communism. What I'd say is that the elites who think of themselves as communist have been managing China according to their conception of what the public purpose is. And they don't have a corruption problem. When they start getting corruption in China, they recognize it and they stamp it out. They're very strong about that. Okay. So their principles of guidance involve their concepts of what's good for China, and they moderate the capitalist elements and guide them towards doing what they think is good for China. We've had a big failure here in terms of our government trying to accomplish or even trying to conceptualize a vision of the public purpose, which is systematic and can allow the guidance of our complex adaptive system. I mean, all we have now is a bunch of ad hoc capitalism that's driving everything. And it's led to a very unhealthy society that is very unequal. And that, if we don't do something different, is heading for a breakup. Frosty says the U.S. needs to never bail China out if the USSR collapses. There isn't any more USSR to collapse, of course. But I don't think we have to bail out China. I think China's doing fine. It's our society that has the problems.
Exactly. We're the ones that I wouldn't talk about anybody else. I mean, really, look at us.
Now look at us.
We're a terrible, terrible, if any other country was the way we are, we'd be criticizing the hell out of them.
Yes, we would. Frosty says, correction, the U.S. needs to not bail the CCP out if and when it collapses. I don't know whether the CCP is going to collapse, okay, or not. If I look at the example, okay, of other nations, okay, let's take the nation of Mexico, okay, as one example. It used to have one-party rule for many years. The PRI governed Mexico, and there was, never any other party. Gradually, Mexico developed into a multi-party system. It became too capitalist, okay, and too corrupt. And then in recent years, there was the rise of the Morena Party. And that party has been very successful and is reforming Mexico and creating a greater degree of equality and a greater degree of social purpose. And it's been a very successful party and very, very good, for Mexico. In China, the CCP has been much more successful than the PRI party was, in Mexico. So it may take some time for it, to break apart. Because as long as it's successful, and as long as it aggregates the various interests, inside of China, and it continues to satisfy people, it is not going to break up. It is not going to collapse. But when it does, I don't think it's going to collapse. I think what's going to happen is that some other parties, will grow up, and there will be an accommodation with those other parties as there was in Mexico, instead of just a collapse of the Communist Party. It's not going to be like what happened to Russia, because the Communist Party is much more adaptive than the Communist Party, of Russia was. Talking about the Communist Party of China now. First, he'd say, Trump was much more like Reagan in his approach. Even though Reagan visited Russia, he also said, tear down this wall. China is heading towards another real estate collapse. It may be heading towards a real estate collapse, but its government is adaptive enough to handle that. I mean, China has a sovereign currency, except for the fact that it still pegs to the dollar sometimes. But it can stop the peg to the dollar at a moment's notice, and it will have a totally sovereign currency. And so that currency can help it adapt to any real estate collapse. A real estate collapse for a nation that is sovereign in its own currency is a trivial matter to correct for and to handle. It isn't a serious problem. As Russia completes transition to a full war economy, we have not. I don't know where that quote actually comes from. It's not transitioning to a full war economy. I think Putin is being very careful about that. How can people call T-45 a peacetime POTUS when he is starting tariff wars within his first 100 days? Well, there are contradictory tendencies in the Trump administration, right now. He's crazy about these tariff wars. On the other hand, though, he does seem to want to stop the actual armed wars, at least in other sectors of the world. We have to see how things develop. Right now, his administration is full of contradictions. We don't know if it will continue to be full of contradictions. It's only a few weeks old. We don't know what's going to happen 3 weeks from now or next month. He may quickly adjust to the fact that his policies aren't working. He's very mercurial. His policies are very mercurial. Evelina says Americans are rationing food. Yes, in some cases. Practicing austerity. That sounds like a war economy, at least on the grassroots level. I don't think it sounds like a war economy. It sounds like an economy in which the poor people are not making enough to live on. That's what's going on here. There are no supply problems with respect to food. They're not rationing food because the supply of food is short. They're rationing food because their pay is too low. Because there hasn't been an adjustment in the minimum wage since what? Since 2008 or something like that. It's the longest period in history with no adjustment to the minimum wage. I mean, we are being ridiculous in this country. We've allowed the wealthy people to get much too powerful. We have to stop that. We have to have a successful dump the corruption movement. If we don't get one, I think this country can split apart. Even if it's practicing austerity, that sounds like a war economy, at least on the grassroots level. Well, if there's no war, it's not a war economy. Friesty says, we're standing with Taiwan, no wavering. I think Trump will sell Taiwan down the river in a New York second, if it comes to that. He doesn't really care about Taiwan. All he has to do is see that we can do nothing about taking over Taiwan. He will see that sooner or later. Friesty says retreat is in our national security interest. Of course it's in our national security interest. We can no longer be the hegemon. We don't have the capability to be the hegemon. I mean, if you take the first article we did here tonight seriously, you see we don't have the technological capability to be the hegemon anymore. We certainly don't have the military capability. We don't have the soldiers. I mean, our armed forces on the ground, 400,000, 450,000. I mean, what are we talking about? That's ridiculous. In another year, Russia will have an army of 2.5 million. And that's not a big army by World War II standards either. We had the same population as Russia in World War II. We had a military establishment of 15 million people. That was a war economy, Evelina. This is not a war economy. Fry Steve says, since Trump doesn't know history, he is the weakest president on geopolitics, especially Taiwan. That's why we have Senate and Congress. Yeah, he probably is. I don't think he's the weakest president on geopolitics. I think Biden was the weakest president on geopolitics. But Trump is a close second. I mean, that was a terrible choice, okay, in the last election. I warned against that choice for 3 years, and we got it anyway. Nobody was listening. Frosty says, we buy lithium, but we don't steal it. Okay, there's a difference. I don't know what you're saying, Steve. Frosty
The
says,
U.S. is known for stealing.
yes, we do know for stealing. Oh, he's saying that we buy lithium, but we don't steal it. Okay, there's a difference. Well, actually, we do a lot to set the prices, to help the corporations to set the prices for lithium. And we try to set up the situation so no one can buy the lithium except our country. We do that. We use our military influence. We use our political influence. We use our ability to overturn the governments of South American countries. We use the CIA to influence who these countries will sell, okay, their lithium to. Maybe you don't want to call that stealing, but it's certainly not a case of free market activity where the producers can sell to the highest bidder. That is not what's been going on, okay, in Latin America. There are constant threats to overturn the regimes of Latin America, especially in those countries which have the lithium resources. They're always under attack by the CIA. Friar Steve says, I read a lot of what came out of Hong Kong. They lived under the CCP. Well, only in recent years they've lived under the CCP. I think Hong Kong is still doing very well economically, are they not?
Yes.
Doc, President Xi made it clear it is very centralized. No, he didn't. He didn't make it clear. That's not the system they have. There's a strong central guidance there. There's no question about that. But it is not highly centralized in day-to-day decision making.
And they're looking to improve everything,
Yes.
and they improve the lives of the people.
And what they mean by improvement is doing things according to their conception of the public purpose. That doesn't exist here in our country. We don't worry about the public purpose. We worry about what the rich donors want. Doc, Russia's mafia state and Putin. That's the bottom line. Oh, Steve. And you think Trump doesn't have a mafia state? What is he setting up right now? What is he trying to do? What are we seeing as we speak? What I see in Russia, though, is I see Putin. I see him managing a collective leadership where a lot of people have influence. I don't see him as a dictator at all.
No. Every presidency, we've had here, I shouldn't say every presidency, but when you look at it, you look at Biden had his thugs. You could say his mafia. You're going to have Trump with his. We know the Clintons had their gang. So who are we to say about anybody else?
Evelyn says it was horrible for them under British rule. You mean horrible for China?
Africa. Well, Africa. Oh, what did you say about on the French rule?
Well, in Africa, there was French rule and British rule.
Yeah.
Okay. In West Asia, there was British rule and also some French rule in Lebanon and in Syria. Steve Wolfman says in China, people own their own homes. Yes, they do. Doc, several articles out about Russia transitioning to a full war economy. Those articles are bullshit, Friar Steve. If Russia was transitioning to a full war economy, there would be plans to expand the armed forces to 15 million people. How do I know that? Because that's what we did in World War II when we had a full war economy with about the same population that Russia has now. Russia is transitioning to an armed force of 2.5 million. That's far from a full war economy. That's more like the war machine we had during the 1960s, which wasn't a full war economy, of course. Doc, retreat is not our international security interest. The U.S. would never be. I'm not talking about isolationism. I'm not saying there should be isolationism. There should be international trade and collaboration with lots of governments around the world. But we can't be the hegemon anymore. We have 340 million people here. They have 4.5 times that much, in China. And their economic base is newer than ours. And on a PPP basis, their GDP is greater and growing greater each year. There's no way we can dominate China in international relations. And there's no way we can dominate a combination of China, Russia, okay, and Iran. There's no way, Friar Steve. Face it. And as far as dominating a combination like the BRICS, year after year, that's going to be less and less possible. I keep saying it, Doc. We do not go to war alone.
The U.S. should start focusing on the U.S.
What are you talking about? The West is getting slaughtered in Ukraine. We have the whole collective West collaborating to keep the Ukrainians in business with a huge expenditure of funds, many times what Russia has spent, and Ukraine is on the point of collapse. What good were the European nations in helping Ukraine to stay afloat? I'm asking you, Friar Steve, look at it honestly. What good are they when it comes to military preparedness? What good are they when it comes to military effort? For that matter, what good are we? What experience we have into the kind of integrated war the Russians have been fighting in Ukraine? We do not go to war alone. No, we go to war with a bunch of incompetents, even more incompetent than we are. Oh, I'm sorry, Evelina. I thought you were talking to me. Friar Steve said retreat is in our national. Also said retreat is in our national interest. I thought he was saying retreat is not in our national interest. I said we, not Russia, is experiencing a war economy. No, I understand you said that. I don't agree that we're experiencing a war economy. Not yet. Nowhere near a war economy. But we're experiencing, okay, is austerity, but that's because of the way we're allowing all the money to flow to the top. That has nothing to do with being a war economy. That has something to do with the oligarchy that we have been creating here in this country. And the tolerance, okay, of oligarchy, okay, is due to we ourselves. When we vote, we're not stopping the oligarchy. We're supporting two parties that are aiding and abetting, have been aiding and abetting the development of oligarchy, and have now created a devastating oligarchy that is openly dominating the government. But we are not experiencing a war economy. We are experiencing an oligarchical economy where wealth is concentrated in a relatively few hands. That's what's wrong with our country. It's not a war economy. Yes, Doc, he's trying to emulate his hero, Putin. His hero, I don't think, is Putin. I think his hero is Hitler. Evelina says Hong Kong. Frosty says, D, disagree. You need to name me Biden's mafia. I can name the new administration's ones.
Biden has been around for a long time. And he's got a lot of connections and there's a lot of crookedness and thugs, you can say, he's associated with.
Well, he didn't have a mafia, okay, in that sense. What Biden was doing is he was suppressing dissent in various ways, using the machinery of government to suppress disagreements and dissent in this country. How did he do that? He collaborated with the social media companies to suppress people who were dissenting. I mean, we have felt that ourselves.
Yes, we have.
Okay, our own streams have been suppressed over a rather long period of time. Most of alternative media has been systematically suppressed by the social media companies for a long time. That was what Biden, was doing. He was using the State Department to suppress certain people. Now, there's the treatment that Scott Ritter has experienced from the State Department, is a case in point. I mean, Scott Ritter wasn't doing anything illegal, but they've taken away his passport. There is voter suppression going on in this country. It's practiced by the Republicans. It's also practiced by the Democrats, in certain areas. There's party suppression going on, third-party suppression by both of the major parties. There is Biden's mafia.
Right. He did not even allow a, like you said, when it comes to dissent, there was no reason for him, for example, when the issue with Russia and Ukraine, all of a sudden to take down RT America, you had a bunch of, Lee Camp and a bunch of Americans who were employed, U.S. citizens employed for RT America. If you don't want to watch something, don't watch it. But there was no reason for that, and totally, when we know where Palestine's concerned too, suppressing people for speaking out, to just providing information about what's going on. The thuggery.
Yes.
So he was terrible when it came to free speech.
Also, Evelina points out it was horrible for Hong Kong under British rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was. I never really studied Hong Kong, but I know the British ruled it with an iron hand. Frosty says, Doc, in Ukraine, there's only one group of service members fighting Ukrainian. Come on. There's no basis for saying there are North Koreans. But even if there were North Koreans, how many North Koreans do you think there are? 5,000, maybe 10,000? They're not fighting on the front lines. That's a ridiculous fable.
Fries, no, like you continue on. I'm not.
So Friesty says Russia needed extra boots on the ground. Ukraine is only Ukrainians fighting their fight. Yeah,
No.
British who were there. What about the Americans who were there? How about the French who were there? How about Germans who were there? I mean, don't you read what's going on in Ukraine?
And plus, even they have people from Africa, mercenaries looking for people that want to, in different countries that want to, I guess, having problems, financially with situations, make some money, and
Yeah, the Ukrainians have been employing jihadists. That's what's going on in Ukraine.
Yes, I saw that too.
If U.S. boots go on the ground, in Ukraine, Russia will be done. We control the air. Are you, Friar Steve? If we try to control the air, with what? What are we going to control the air with? If we try to attack Russia from the air, the S-400 and S-500 systems are going to destroy our air forces. The S-500 systems can knock the F-35s out of the sky. We're not going to control the air. There's no way we're going to control the air. Finland and Sweden can both decide to end. Finland and Sweden are particularly weak countries. They have no military capacity worth talking about. They don't compare to the Russians at all. They have no integrated fighting capacity. Evelina says, yes, I know it's not a way economy. I was being facetious by saying we're living in austerity and rationing food. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you were being facetious. But I guess the reason why I didn't realize that is because I think poor people are rationing food in this country. I think it is going on.
It is, because I've read people saying that, they live on one meal a day.
Yes, I've heard that too. And I think that is going on in this country. And it's going on because the minimum wage is what? Still $7.20 an hour. People are working 2 and 3 jobs on minimum wage. Frosty Doc, we are a republic. We change out oligarchy. Oh, come on.
Come on.
Come on, Steve. I mean, have you looked at the federal government? I mean, what do you think Doge is about? What is that guy doing, camping out at the White House? Well, he's no longer camping out at the White House. He was thrown out into the old executive office building, which is right next to the White House. The only person that made that change was Trump 45, sad to say. Trump 45, let's see. We had Bush 43, Obama was 44, Trump was 45, Biden was 46, and now Trump is 47. Actually, this is Trump 47, I think. But the point is, okay, in the Trump cabinets, in the first Trump cabinet, there were a number of millionaires. In this cabinet, there are millionaires as well. There are donors all over the place. There were donors dominating the inauguration ceremony. They're obviously constantly in contact with Trump. We don't change out our oligarchy every 4 years. We have a uniparty system.
Exactly. Go from the oligarchs with the Democrats, and then the oligarchs with the Republicans.
Steve Wolford's Biden crime family all got pardoned. Yes, but the Biden crime family was not, an oligarchy of wealth. And they didn't have iron control over the country. If they did have that kind of control, then the Democrats would have continued to rule. Frosty says, yes, Doc, they kept the power in the hands of the few, but the new admins make that work. Doc, voter suppression is going to be a big problem that needs to be addressed. It is a big problem. It's not going to be.
It has been.
It has been. Steve Wolfman said RT was great. I agree. RT was a great source of information. I will send you you don't have to send me articles on RT. I used to read RT all the time. Okay. And what I'm telling you is that RT coverage was more objective than the New York Times any day in the week. The New York Times and the Washington Post have become disgraces. And as for the cable news networks, they're propaganda organs of our government right now. Fry says, Tim Pool received $100,000 per episode to push Russian propaganda for RT. What episode? What episode? And what are you talking about? Name any units that went there that you described. Well, I'm not talking about units. I'm talking about jihadis that came into Ukraine and began to fight. I don't know what units they were in, but there are many narratives about the jihadis that were brought in by the Ukrainian secret police to help them fight in Ukraine.
Right. And they also trained them and they went over to Syria as well.
Okay, the Wagner Group, okay, is mercenaries, but in general, the Wagner Group is made up of Russians. It's made up of Russians who were in prison and who've been let out, okay, in order to fight. And they've done a damn good job of fighting for Russia. Doc, yet not one F-35 has been locked out of the sky. That is definitely not true. There are F-35s that have been, okay, destroyed. But in addition, the F-35 has a terrible maintenance problem. It is down 50% of the time. Fries says, Finland and Sweden are both in NATO. So what? They have no military capability, whether they're in NATO or not. They can't fight their way out of a paper bag. Doc, the new men gave us a brand new oligarch. Welcome to the new age. Trump is T-45 forever. Well, now he's T-47. But he's not forever. Don't think for a minute that dictators are but forever. When conditions change, the dictators fall. Isn't that the history of Europe in a good part of the post-war period? The history of dictators falling. Yes, they were in the satellite countries, but when Russia withdrew from the satellite countries, the dictators were still there. But the people overthrew them. Their secret police didn't help them. There were revolutions in country after country. Even Ceausescu was overthrown. So dictators are not forever. They appear to be forever when they're oppressing the people. Okay, but they are not forever. If Trump becomes a dictator here, even Trump is not going to be forever because the chances are he's going to die in office. I don't know exactly when, but he's not the healthiest guy ever to inhabit the presidency. RT cover was disinformation. Oh, come on.
Come on, Steve.
Come on, Steve. If you read RT every day and you read the articles by Americans and British people and various other people who were writing for RT, you can't escape the conclusion that they were telling the truth as they saw it, and that also their analysis was very high quality. Okay, Pepe Escobar writes for Russian outlets right now, but he's not a Russian propagandist. That's not what he does. He's a journalist who tells the truth about what he sees. Well, Doc, there's a dictator in Russia and he's still there. We'll vote hours away. I don't think Putin is a dictator.
I don't either.
I don't think he acts that way. I think he's got people around him who he's had around for years who are obviously not afraid of him. They work with him on a daily basis. Lavrov is intelligent, okay, as they come. And he obviously isn't afraid of Putin. If you want to see a dictator, look at Stalin. I mean, everybody in the leadership was afraid of Stalin constantly. They were afraid Stalin was going to kill him. There isn't that kind of fear in the people around Putin. I mean, they know Putin's not going to kill them, and they're not worried about that. Now, it's true that Putin, somewhere along the way, has probably been involved in the killing of a few opponents of himself. But invariably, those opponents were funded by Western intelligence agencies. As long as you're not funded by a Western intelligence agency, I don't think Putin's going to kill you. Yes, Doc,
Right.
as the former
Putin got to them. Yeah.
I think the
Because
former KGB people are mostly old, and he's probably got a bunch of young people around him who had nothing to do with the KGB. He himself, of course, okay, was KGB, but you know, he was also a lawyer. And he's very lawyer-like in his approach to many problems. Anyway, we've taken up a lot of time talking about this. Dog will have to disagree. Putin kills everybody that opposes him. Well, I don't know what you mean by opposes him. There are people who disagree with Putin every day. He works with them, and life goes on. And that's the way government actually goes on in Russia. There's a lot of disagreement.
Putin is smart. Like you say, being former KGB, he knows the way the West is. And we could talk about any country and look at how the West is.
Yeah, look at how the CIA is trying to overturn regimes in nations that have foreign policies that disagree with the U.S. If your foreign policy is in disagreement with U.S. foreign policy, you run the risk of getting your government and your regime overthrown by the CIA. That's the way the CIA operates. We have to stop that kind of foreign policy. It breeds a paranoia in the countries that the CIA operates in. And a paranoid kind of environment is the kind of environment that's fertile ground for authoritarians. I would love to hear who you think disagrees with Putin. All kinds of people around are disagreeing with him all the time. I mean, there are plenty of narratives about people disagreeing about this, people disagreeing about that. Specifically, his generals are often in disagreement with him. Specifically, Dmitry Medvedev is in disagreement with him. He thinks that Putin is much too soft in his approach to Ukraine, and he's been publicly saying that for some time. Putin isn't making any move to disagree with him. Steve Miliband said, and how many did the Clintons kill? I don't know. I think the Clintons killed a few people. I'm not sure of the circumstances.
A few? That's being courteous. They've got a long list.
There may be a long list, but there were many people who opposed the Clintons that they failed to kill. Like, for example, Mitch McConnell, right?
Yeah.
Nobody killed old Mitch. Doc, just give me one name. Let's see how long. I just gave you a few names, Friar Steve, already. Yeah, and they're still alive. So,
Coming from the US, I mean, it's pretty rich when you think about criticizing others with the antics of the USA around the world.
okay, so it's 11:41. We never got to Michael Hudson's article. Okay, now this is a problem because Michael Hudson's article is 3,600 words.
So should I do a show tomorrow night? I could do a show tomorrow night and we'll talk about it.
No, I think I'm going to be busy tomorrow night.
Or Monday.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to be busy on Monday also. That's
Okay.
shopping day. And after I'm finished, with that day, I always feel like I want to relax. So
Okay.
I don't want to do it on Monday night. Okay, let's see how tomorrow goes.
Okay.
And maybe if you want to have a show tomorrow night, okay,
Yeah,
maybe
well,
we can do it tomorrow night.
yeah, right. 9:15. Is that good for you, 9:15, or do you want to do earlier?
Well, I'm going to have to, play by ear and see how tomorrow goes.
Okay.
We have an important call with a family member that may take a long time.
Mm.
So if that takes too much time, then, I won't feel like doing a show tomorrow night. But if tomorrow, if it works out, the call is shorter than I think, then I may want to do that.
Okay, well, just let me know.
Okay, I will let you know. I will be sure to let you know. Okay, so I think I am ready to say goodnight for now. No. Friar Steve, Prigozhin wasn't in disagreement with Putin. He tried to march on Moscow to get rid of the Moscow government. He tried to march on Moscow while protesting, that he wasn't going to overthrow Putin. He was just going to overthrow the rest of the military, of the Russian military. Yeah, and we know how that ended for him. It was a clear case of treason, Friar Steve. A clear case of treason. If we had a general in this country who did that, he would have been before a firing squad in 24 hours. Come on, Steve. Be objective. I mean, you know what Prigozhin did. Steve Wolfman says, good night, everyone. Friar Steve said, next week, follow up on red heifer. Jewish rabbis think it's not a god. Yeah, Jewish rabbis don't think the red heifer is a god.
Well, they don't think it's a good idea either. There's a lot of what would you say, rabbis that follow normal that just they don't I don't know, the whole thing just gets you crazy
Right.
because there
Okay,
was
let's say good night.
Okay, before we get on to another conversation.
And hold off discussions on the red heifer until next week.
Yes. We'll
Okay,
have Red
thank
Heifer
you,
News
Steve.
next
Thanks
week.
for all your comments, even though we disagree with most of them. They're still fun, so
Right. And it's always good to have a conversation about different viewpoints.
yes, it is.
Good night, Bonnie.
Okay, good night, Friar Steve, and also Dee, good night to you, and
Good night, Steve Wolfbrand, and
thank you very much for coming. Yeah, good night, Steve.
also Evelina. Good night. Thank you, everyone, for your comments.
Right. And try to answer the question of why we had so few people here tonight, because I think we had a real good show. So
We did, yes. We'll have to share it around again.
I'll never understand this. I will never understand this.
Okay, I'm leaving. Good night.
Okay, good night. I'm going to end the stream now, folks. Steve says, good show. Thank you, Steve. I thought it was a good show, too.